The wind cut through the Oregon Territory like a blade, carrying with it the promise of another brutal night. Samuel Harrison pulled his worn coat tighter as he guided his oxen through the deepening snow, their breath forming ghostly clouds in the bitter air. The trail ahead stretched endlessly white, marked only by the faint ruts of countless wagons that had passed this way before him. 3 months since he'd buried Martha and the child that never drew breath. 3 months since he'd sold everything back in Missouri and joined this godforsaken migration west. The other families in his wagon train had pulled ahead days ago, eager to reach the settlements before the worst of winter set in. But Sam's oxen were weak, his supplies running low, and his heart just wasn't in any hurry to reach tomorrow. The snow was falling heavier now, fat flakes that stuck to his beard and made it hard to see more than 20 yards ahead. He was considering making camp when something dark caught his eye beside the trail. At first, he thought it might be a fallen log or a boulder, but as he drew closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a child, a small figure huddled against the base of a pine tree, nearly buried in snow. Sam hauled back on the reins and jumped down from his wagon, his boots crunching through the drifts as he approached. The child didn't move, didn't even seem to be breathing. "Hey there," he called softly, kneeling beside the small form. "Hey now." When he brushed the snow away, he found himself looking at a young girl, maybe 12 years old, with long black hair and copper skin. Apache, he realized with a start. Her lips were blue with cold, her breathing so shallow he had to lean close to hear it. She wore a beaded doeskin dress that might have been beautiful once, but now was torn and stained with what looked like dried blood. Sam glanced around quickly, searching for signs of her family, a wagon, anything that might explain how she'd come to be here alone. 20 yards away, he spotted the charred remains of a small cart, still smoldering despite the snow. Personal belongings were scattered across the ground. A broken pot, torn clothing, a child's moccasin. "Jesus," he whispered, understanding flooding over him. Raiders, maybe. Or soldiers. In this territory, it could be either. The girl stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. Sam made his decision without thinking about it. He stripped off his heavy blanket, the last good one he had, and wrapped it around her small frame. She was lighter than he expected as he lifted her, her body trembling like a bird's. "Easy now," he murmured, carrying her to his wagon. "I got you." He cleared a space among his supplies and laid her down as gently as he could, piling what remained of his bedding around her. Her eyes opened then, dark and wide with fear, darting around the unfamiliar space before settling on his face. "No hurt," she whispered, in broken English, her voice barely audible. "Please, no hurt." Sam felt something twist in his chest. "I ain't gonna hurt you, child. You're safe now." She stared at him for a long moment, those dark eyes searching his face as if trying to read his intentions. Then her eyelids grew heavy again, and she slipped back into unconsciousness. Sam climbed back onto the wagon seat, his mind racing. Taking in an Apache girl was dangerous, maybe even deadly. The settlers in Oregon Territory weren't known for their tolerance, and with tensions running high between the army and the tribes, harboring an Indian child could be seen as treason by some. But as he looked back at the small shivering form in his wagon, he knew he couldn't leave her to die. Martha would have taken her in without question. Hell, Martha would have already been spooning warm broth between those blue lips and singing lullabies. The snow was coming down harder now, and the temperature was dropping fast. Sam urged his oxen forward, searching for shelter. They needed to get warm, and they needed to get warm soon, or they'd both be joining Martha in whatever came after this life. Behind them, the trail disappeared beneath the falling snow, along with any trace of the tragedy that had brought them together. As darkness settled over the frozen landscape, Sam Harrison found himself responsible for more than just his own survival. In saving this child, he'd chosen a path that would test everything he thought he knew about right and wrong, about family and loyalty, about the price of compassion in a world that seemed to have forgotten what the word meant. The girl stirred again, whispering something in Apache that he couldn't understand. But her tone was clear enough. She was calling for her family, for someone who would never answer again. Sam reached back and gently touched her forehead. "You ain't alone," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Dawn broke gray and bitter over the makeshift camp Sam had managed to set up in the shelter of a rocky outcropping. The fire he'd built through the night had kept them alive, but barely. His fingers were numb as he stirred the thin gruel he'd made from his dwindling oats, stretching what little he had to feed 2 mouths instead of 1. The girl, he still didn't know her name, had awakened twice during the night, each time with the same wide-eyed terror, speaking rapid Apache before remembering where she was. Now she sat wrapped in his blanket, watching him with careful eyes as he approached with the warm bowl. "You need to eat," Sam said gently, offering her the spoon. She shrank back slightly, and he set the bowl within her reach instead. "It ain't much, but it'll keep you going." She studied the food suspiciously, then looked up at him. "You, white man, why help?" Her English was halting but clear enough. Sam settled back on his heels, considering his answer. "Because you needed help. Don't reckon the color of your skin changes that much." "Others do," she said quietly, then reached for the bowl with trembling hands. She ate slowly as if expecting him to snatch it away at any moment. "What's your name, child?" Sam asked after she'd finished half the bowl. "Ayana," she whispered. "Mean, eternal blossom. Grandmother give name." "Ayana," Sam repeated, trying to get the pronunciation right. "That's a pretty name. I'm Sam." "Samuel." She nodded gravely. "Samuel. You have woman? Children?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "Had a wife. Martha. She died." He cleared his throat. "Baby too." Ayana's expression softened with understanding. "I sorry, death is hard thing." "Yes," Sam said simply. "It is." They broke camp in silence, Sam loading his few possessions while Ayana stayed wrapped in the blanket, still weak but able to walk. When he helped her up onto the wagon seat beside him, she flinched at the contact but didn't pull away. The trail was treacherous, covered in ice and snow that made the oxen stumble. Sam had to get down frequently to guide them around obstacles, and each time he did, he noticed Ayana watching the surrounding landscape with alert, intelligent eyes. She was reading the terrain in ways he couldn't, he realized, looking for signs of danger, escape routes, anything that might threaten their safety. "You see something?" he asked as they crested a small hill. Ayana pointed to a distant ridge. "Smoke, maybe 2 mile. Could be soldiers, could be—" She struggled for the English word. "Bad men." "Raiders," she nodded. "Men who kill for things. Take horses, take women." Her voice grew hard. "Take children." Sam felt his jaw tighten. "Is that what happened to your family?" Ayana was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "We go to meeting. White chief say want peace. Father believe. Father fool." The bitterness in her voice was sharp as broken glass. Sam wanted to say something to offer comfort, but what words could possibly heal a wound that deep? Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out his old revolver, checking to make sure it was loaded. "Well," he said matter-of-factly, "reckon we'll steer clear of that smoke then." Ayana looked at the gun, then at his face. "You fight for me, if I have to." She studied him for a long moment, then slowly unwrapped the blanket from around her shoulders and handed it back to him. "You cold too." Sam shook his head. "You keep it. I got my coat." "No." Her voice was firm. "We share. Like," she searched for the word, "like family." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sam took the blanket and arranged it so it covered both their shoulders as they sat side by side on the wagon seat. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like something more, a tentative bridge across the chasm of culture and circumstance that separated them. As the day wore on, Ayana began to relax slightly. She pointed out tracks in the snow, rabbit, deer, even the paw prints of a mountain cat. She showed him which plants could be eaten and which were poisonous, knowledge that might mean the difference between life and death if their supplies ran out. "Your grandmother teach you?" Sam asked. "Grandmother teach everything. How to find food, how to read sky, how to—" She paused, looking frustrated. "How to know good person from bad person. And what does she tell you about me?" Ayana looked at him seriously. "She say, you have sad eyes, but kind heart. She say, you know pain, so you no give pain to others." Sam felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of grief and guilt he'd been carrying since Martha's death. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." Was wise woman. Soldiers kill her too. The simple statement hit him like a gut punch. He pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. "Ayana, I'm sorry." "I'm so damn sorry." She nodded, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "Is why I scared. Everyone I love, gone." Without thinking, Sam reached out and gently touched her shoulder. This time she didn't flinch away. "You ain't alone," he said, echoing his words from the night before. "I promise you that." As they continued down the trail, the sun began to break through the clouds for the first time in days, casting long shadows across the snow. It wasn't warm, but it was something. a small sign that winter wouldn't last forever, that somewhere ahead lay the promise of spring. But first, they had to survive the cold, and with each mile they traveled deeper into Oregon territory, Sam knew that the real test of their unlikely partnership was yet to come. The sound of approaching horses reached them long before the riders came into view. Ayanna tensed beside Sam on the wagon seat, her hand instinctively moving to the knife she kept hidden in her boot, a blade she'd salvaged from her family's destroyed belongings. 4 men, she whispered, reading the hoofbeats like words on a page. Coming fast. Sam's grip tightened on the reins. They were crossing open prairie now, with nowhere to hide, and no way to outrun mounted men with his tired oxen. Stay calm, he murmured. Let me do the talking. The riders crested the hill behind them, their horses kicking up clouds of snow as they approached. Sam recognized the type immediately. Rough men with hard eyes and weapons worn easy on their hips. Not soldiers, not lawmen. The kind of men who took what they wanted and asked questions later. Hold up there, the leader called out, a burly man with a tobacco-stained beard and a Confederate cavalry hat. The war had been over for 2 years, but some men couldn't let go of old allegiances. For you there in the wagon? Sam pulled his oxen to a stop, his right hand casually moving closer to his coat where his revolver rested. Afternoon, gentlemen. Something I can help you with? The 4 men spread out around the wagon in a practiced formation. The leader's eyes fixed immediately on Ayanna, and his expression hardened. Well, I'll be damned. You got yourself a little Injun there, don't you? The girl's under my protection, Sam said evenly. Protection? The leader laughed, a harsh sound that made Ayanna flinch. Mister, you got any idea what's been happening in these parts? Apache war parties, raiding settlements, killing families, and here you are, traveling with one of them. She's just a child, Sam replied. Apache child grows up to be an Apache warrior. Another rider spoke up, a thin man with a jagged scar across his cheek. Or an Apache squaw, breeding more warriors. Either way, she's trouble. Sam felt Ayanna trembling beside him, but when he glanced at her, her face was set in a mask of stoic defiance. She'd heard these words before, he realized, probably from the mouths of the men who'd killed her family. The girl stays with me, Sam said firmly. The leader's hand moved to rest on his gun butt. See, that's where you're wrong, friend. Territory's got a bounty on Apache scalps. $50, regardless of age. That little savage there represents good money. Over my dead body. That can be arranged. The leader's voice turned cold. Now you seem like a reasonable man. You step down from that wagon, walk away, and we'll make this quick for the girl. Fight us, and we'll make sure you both suffer. The prairie fell silent except for the wind and the nervous stamping of horses. Sam could feel the weight of 4 guns trained on him, could see the calculation in their eyes. They'd done this before. Samuel, Ayanna whispered in his ear, so quietly only he could hear. When I move, you shoot, tall one. I take care of others. No, he whispered back. You're just a child. I am Apache, she replied, and suddenly her voice carried the steel of generations of warriors. I am daughter of the desert wind. Before Sam could react, Ayanna let out a piercing war cry and dove from the wagon. The sound was so unexpected, so primal, that it spooked 2 of the horses and sent their riders scrambling to maintain control. Sam drew his revolver and fired at the leader in one smooth motion, the bullet taking the man in the shoulder and spinning him from his saddle. The thin man with the scar was raising his rifle when something flashed through the air, Ayanna's knife, thrown with deadly accuracy. It buried itself in his gun arm, and he screamed as the weapon fell from nerveless fingers. The remaining 2 riders were fighting their panicked horses when Sam's oxen, startled by the gunfire, bolted forward. One of the riders was bowled over by the wagon tongue, his horse rearing and throwing him to the ground. Run! Sam shouted to Ayanna as he fired at the last mounted man who was trying to get a clear shot. The bullet went wide, but it sent the rider galloping for cover behind a cluster of rocks. Ayanna was already moving, darting between the confused horses with the fluid grace of someone raised in the wild. She retrieved her knife from the wounded man's arm, ignoring his curses, and vaulted back onto the wagon as Sam fought to control his frightened oxen. Go, go, she urged, and Sam whipped the reins, driving the animals forward at a pace that would exhaust them but might save their lives. Behind them, the survivors were regrouping. The leader was back on his horse despite his wounded shoulder, his face twisted with rage. You're dead, he screamed after them. Both of you, I'll see you strung up for this. Sam pushed the oxen harder than he ever had, the wagon bouncing and sliding over the rough ground. Ayanna clung to the seat beside him, her face pale but determined. There, she pointed ahead to a stand of timber. We hide there. They no follow in dark. They reached the trees just as the sun was setting, the wagon plunging into the shadowy protection of pine and oak. Sam didn't stop until they were deep in the woods, finally pulling up beside a small creek where the sound of water would mask their presence. As he unhitched the exhausted oxen, his hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the realization of what had just happened. He'd killed a man, maybe two, and for what? For a child he'd known less than a week. "You hurt?" Ayana asked quietly, checking him for wounds. "No," Sam said. "You?" She shook her head, then looked up at him with those dark, serious eyes. "You could have let them take me. Would have been easier." Sam knelt down so they were at eye level. "Ayana, listen to me. I don't abandon family, and like it or not, that's what you are now. Family." For the first time since he'd found her, Ayana smiled, a small, hesitant thing, but genuine. "Family," she repeated, tasting the word. As they made camp in the gathering darkness, both of them knew that the men they'd fought would be back. Word would spread that Samuel Harrison was traveling with an Apache girl, and every bounty hunter and Indian killer in the territory would be looking for them. But something had changed between them in those violent moments on the prairie. They were no longer just a man and a child thrown together by circumstance. They were partners now, bound by shared danger and mutual trust. The real test, Sam knew, was still to come. They had been traveling for 3 days through increasingly rough country when Ayana suddenly stiffened beside Sam on the wagon seat. Her head turned slightly, listening to something he couldn't hear. "Stop," she whispered urgently. Sam pulled the oxen to a halt, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun. "What is it?" "We are watched." Her voice was barely audible. "Apache. My people." The words sent a chill down Sam's spine. He scanned the rocky hills around them, seeing nothing but scrub brush and shadow. But Ayana's senses had proven sharper than his more than once. "How many?" he asked quietly. 6, maybe 7. She closed her eyes, concentrating. "They have been following since yesterday. Now they decide." A figure materialized on the ridge ahead of them as if conjured from the stone itself. Then another, and another, until 7 Apache warriors sat their horses in a line across their path. They were painted for war, their faces marked with streaks of red and black, lances and rifles held ready. "Jesus," Sam breathed. "No sudden moves," Ayana warned. "Let me speak first." The lead warrior, a man perhaps 40 years old with eagle feathers in his long black hair, rode slowly down the slope toward them. His eyes never left Ayana's face, and Sam could see recognition there, and something else, anger. The warrior spoke in rapid Apache, his voice carrying across the still air like the crack of a whip. Ayana responded in the same language, her tone respectful but firm. The exchange continued for several minutes, growing more heated with each exchange. "What's he saying?" Sam asked quietly. "His name is Nalnish. He was friend to my father." Ayana's voice was tight with emotion. "He says I bring shame to our people by traveling with white man. Says I should come home, forget this foolishness. And what are you telling him? Truth, that my home is burned, my family is dead, that you saved my life when my own people could not." Nalnish spoke again, his words sharp as arrow points. Ayana flinched as if struck. "He says you are white devil. Says all whites lie, all whites kill Apache for sport. He says you keep me as pet. That soon you will sell me to soldiers, or worse." Sam felt anger rise in his chest. "Tell him he's wrong. He will not believe words from white mouth," Ayana said, "but maybe he will believe test." Before Sam could ask what she meant, Ayana was speaking again in Apache, her voice carrying a note of challenge. Nalnish's eyebrows rose, and he looked at Sam with new interest, the look of a predator sizing up prey. "What did you just do?" Sam asked. "I tell him you prove yourself, Apache way." Ayana's face was pale but determined. "Single combat, no guns. If you win, he let us pass. If I lose, I'm dead and you go with them." "Yes." Sam looked up at the 7 warriors watching them from the ridge, then at the man who would be his opponent. Nalnish was built like a whipcord, all lean muscle and controlled power. He probably had 20 years of fighting experience on Sam, knew a dozen ways to kill a man with his bare hands. "There has to be another way," Sam said. "No other way," Ayana replied quietly. "This is only chance." Nalnish dismounted and began stripping off his war shirt, revealing a torso crisscrossed with old scars. He spoke again, and this time Sam caught one word he recognized: Bilagaana, white man, but not in a friendly context. "He says you are soft," Says white men fight only with guns because they have no courage for honest battle, Ayana translated. He says he will make it quick. Sam climbed down from the wagon, his joints protesting. At 43, he was no longer the young man who'd wrestled steers and broken horses back in Missouri, but he'd been in his share of fights, and he understood that this was about more than just passage through Apache territory. This was about Ayana's future, about whether she would be forced to return to a people who might never fully accept her again after traveling with whites. He pulled off his coat and shirt, the cold air raising goosebumps on his skin. Nalnish nodded approvingly at the scars Sam bore, a puckered bullet wound from the war, knife marks from a saloon fight years ago, the general collection of damage that came from a hard life on the frontier. The two men circled each other warily. Nalnish moved like a cat, balanced and fluid, while Sam planted his feet and waited. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best strategy was to let the other man make the first move. Nalnish feinted left, then came in low and fast, trying to tackle Sam around the waist. Sam sidestepped and brought his knee up, catching the Apache in the ribs. Nalnish grunted but rolled away, coming back to his feet with barely a pause. They grappled then, strength against skill, experience against desperation. Nalnish was faster, but Sam was heavier, and he used his weight to his advantage, trying to pin the warrior down. Nalnish slipped free like smoke and landed a series of quick punches to Sam's kidneys that made him gasp. The fight continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Both men were bleeding now, their breath coming in harsh gasps. Sam's left eye was swelling shut, and he could taste blood from a split lip, but Nalnish was favoring his right side, where Sam had managed to land a solid blow, and his movements were beginning to slow. Finally, Sam saw his opening. Nalnish overextended on a punch, and Sam caught his wrist, using the warrior's own momentum to throw him to the ground. Before Nalnish could recover, Sam was on him, his forearm pressed against the Apache's throat. They stayed frozen like that for a long moment, both men breathing hard. Sam could feel Nalnish's pulse hammering against his arm, could see the calculation in the warrior's eyes as he decided whether to continue fighting or yield. "Enough," Nalnish said in English, the word coming out as a croak. Sam released him and rolled away, both men struggling to their feet. Nalnish looked at him with something that might have been respect, then spoke in Apache to Ayana. "He says you fight with honor," she translated, tears streaming down her face. He says, maybe some white men have Apache hearts." Nalnish walked over to Sam and placed his hand on the white man's shoulder. When he spoke this time, his voice was formal, ceremonial. "He gives you Apache name," Ayana said wonderingly. "Bike Hojun, one who walks in beauty. He says you have earned right to protect me." The warrior chief turned to Ayana and spoke again, his voice gentle now. She nodded and responded, and Sam could hear the love and pain in both their voices. "He tells me to remember who I am, to remember the songs grandmother taught me, the stories of our people. He says I carry the spirit of the Chiricahua now wherever I go." Nalnish mounted his horse and raised his hand in farewell. The other warriors melted back into the rocks as silently as they had appeared, leaving Sam and Ayana alone on the trail. "Will we see them again?" Sam asked as he pulled his shirt back on, wincing at his bruised ribs. "Maybe, but not as enemies." Ayana wiped her eyes and climbed back onto the wagon. "They will watch over us from distance. Make sure we reach Oregon territory safely." As they continued down the trail, Sam felt something had changed between them again. The fight had been a kind of ritual, a formal acceptance of their bond by Ayana's people. He was no longer just a white man traveling with an Apache girl. He was family, acknowledged and blessed by the very people who had once been his enemies. The road ahead was still dangerous, still uncertain. But for the first time since finding Ayana half frozen in the snow, Sam felt like they might actually make it to their destination. And more importantly, they would arrive as something neither of them had expected to be again. A family, forged not by blood, but by choice. Tested by fire and accepted by both worlds, they would have to navigate together. The settlement of Willow Creek spread before them like a promise and a threat. After 6 weeks on the trail, the sight of wooden buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, and people going about their daily business should have been welcome. Instead, Sam felt his stomach tighten with dread as he guided his wagon down the main street. Every head turned to stare. Conversations died mid-sentence. Children pointed until their mothers jerked their hands down and hurried them inside. By the time Sam pulled up in front of the general store, a crowd had gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed hostility. "Papa, "Why does that man have an Indian with him?" a young boy asked loudly. "Hush," his mother replied, but her eyes never left Ayana's face. Sam helped Ayana down from the wagon, acutely aware of how small she looked surrounded by all these staring faces. She kept her chin up, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand stayed close to her hidden knife. "You folks need supplies?" The storekeeper, a heavy-set man with suspicious eyes, spoke without moving from his doorway. "Yes, sir. Been on the trail for a spell. Need food, blankets, maybe some grain for the oxen?" "Uh-huh." The man's gaze flicked to Ayana. "What about the girl?" "She's with me." "I can see that. Question is why?" Before Sam could answer, a new voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Samuel Harrison, that really you?" Sam turned to see a familiar face pushing through the onlookers. Tom Brennan, a man he'd known back in Missouri. Tom's expression was a mixture of recognition and concern as he approached. "Tom," Sam nodded, "didn't expect to see you out here." "Could say the same about you." Tom's eyes moved to Ayana. "Though I'm hearing some interesting stories about your travels." "What kind of stories?" "The kind that involve you killing 3 men back near Devil's Canyon. The kind that have bounty hunters asking questions in every settlement between here and the Columbia River." The crowd pressed closer, their mood shifting from curious to dangerous. Sam could feel the weight of their judgment, the calculation behind their stares. These were people who'd lost friends and family to Indian raids, who saw every Apache as a potential threat. "Is it true?" a woman's voice called out. "Did you really gun down white men to protect that savage?" "I protected a child," Sam said quietly. "Nothing more, nothing less." "Apache child," someone else spat. "Probably killed more Christians than you can count. She's 12 years old. Old enough to slit your throat while you sleep," the storekeeper added. "Old enough to lead a war party back here to finish what you started." Ayana stepped closer to Sam, her young face set in stone. She understood enough English to know what they were saying, even if she couldn't follow every word. Sam put his hand on her shoulder, a gesture that drew angry mutters from the crowd. "Look," Tom said, clearly trying to defuse the situation. "Sam's a good man. We all know that. But harboring an Indian, well, that's something different. Something the territorial authorities take real serious." "What are you saying, Tom?" "I'm saying there's a marshal on his way here. Should arrive tomorrow, maybe the day after. He's got warrants for your arrest and orders to take the girl to the reservation school down in Salem." Sam felt Ayana stiffen beside him. They'd talked about the reservation schools during their long days on the trail. She knew what happened there. Apache children torn from their culture, forbidden to speak their own language, forced to abandon everything that made them who they were. "Over my dead body," Sam said quietly. "That can be arranged," a voice called from the back of the crowd, and several men laughed. Tom stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sam, be reasonable. You can't fight the whole territory. Turn the girl over peacefully, and maybe they'll go easy on you. Self-defense plea might work for the killing, and what happens to her? She gets educated, learns to be civilized. Hell, in 10 years she might even thank you for it." Sam looked down at Ayana, saw the fear she was trying so hard to hide. This was the girl who'd thrown a knife with deadly accuracy to save his life, who'd taught him which plants were safe to eat and how to read the weather in the clouds, who'd shown more courage in her 12 years than most men managed in a lifetime. "No," he said simply. The crowd stirred angrily. Someone shouted about Indian lovers and traitors. The storekeeper disappeared inside his shop and emerged with a shotgun. "Then you'd better move along," Tom said urgently. "And I mean right now, before this gets out of hand." Sam nodded and helped Ayana back onto the wagon. As he climbed up beside her, she spoke for the first time since they'd entered town. "I go with Marshall," she said quietly. "You no die for me. Like hell you will." "Samuel," she turned to face him fully. "You give me life already. You give me family is enough." "No, it ain't enough." Sam picked up the reins. "Family doesn't abandon family. Not ever." He turned the wagon around and headed back out of town, the hostile crowd parting reluctantly before them. As they reached the edge of the settlement, Tom called out one last time, "Sam, there's nowhere to run. They'll find you wherever you go." Maybe so, Sam thought. But they'd have to catch them first. 3 miles out of town, he turned the wagon off the main trail and into the forest. Ayana looked at him questioningly. "Where we go now?" Sam smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. "North, up into the mountains. There's country up there so wild the government's never even mapped it. Valleys where a man could build a cabin, raise some cattle, live free. We live free together. We live free together." Ayana was quiet for a moment, then reached over and took his hand. "You sure? Life will be hard. People will always hunt us." "Let them hunt," Sam said. "We got something they don't understand. We got family." As the wagon rolled deeper into the wilderness, leaving civilization and its judgments behind, Sam thought about Martha and the child they'd lost. He'd buried them with love and grief, but he'd also buried hope. Now, impossibly, hope had returned in the form of this brave Apache girl who'd become his daughter in all the ways that mattered. Behind them, smoke from the settlement's chimneys faded into the distance. Ahead lay the unknown, dangerous, uncertain, but free. And somewhere in the vast mountain wilderness, Sam Harrison and Ayana would build a new life together, bound not by law or society's approval, but by the stronger ties of choice, sacrifice, and love. The bounty hunters would come. The marshals would search. But in the end, family was stronger than fear, and freedom was worth any price they might have to pay. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they disappeared into the wilderness. A white rancher and an Apache girl, heading toward a future they would write together, one day at a time.